Oh yes, we finally have a DeLorean on HubNut. This should be fun. They're still fascinating, aren't they? Gull-wing doors, the stainless steel bodywork, the amazing film star looks. Of course, this is the story of the DeLorean DMC-12. And what a story it is, full of intrigue, controversy, quite a lot of money, taxpayer money, somehow went into this indulgence. But yeah, it's kind of hard to know where to begin. So we shall start with looks and take in the looks of the magnificent DeLorean. It's penned by one of my favourite designers, Giorgetto Giugiaro, who worked at Bertoni for a time and then went his own way and set up Ital Design. He designed the Lotus Esprit, and under the skin this is fairly similar but not entirely the same. But the whole car, the whole project, was the thinking of John Zachary DeLorean. He was the son of immigrants in America, a Romanian father, Hungarian mother. Look at these rear lights. Very, very Giugiaro. Very, very of their time. And DeLorean worked his way up through the food chain at General Motors. And he was a fabulous engineer. He gave us cars such as the Pontiac GTO and the Firebird. Turned around Chevrolet's fortunes. And Pontiacs indeed, and became boss of the truck and car division in the early 1970s. But DeLorean didn't always get on with the authorities, so he left with his own vision, a car bearing his own name. And this is it, the DMC-12. It was meant to be one of a range of cars, but I love the way DeLorean is just sort of pressed into the rear bumper almost. So DeLorean has his big idea. Originally the car was to use Ford mechanicals, but in the end Renault was chosen. This has a rear-mounted PRV V6 engine, 2.85 litres, and a paltry 130 brake horsepower. I believe Renault also helped them establish the factory in Northern Ireland, that small part of the island of Ireland, close to the United Kingdom. It gets very confusing, but Northern Ireland, a separate part of the UK. And had huge unemployment, 80% unemployment in the early 1980s. So the then Labour government at the end of the 1970s gave a ton of money to DeLorean to start a car company there, to bring employment to the masses. Problem being, this wasn't really the car for that. It never sold in strong enough numbers. It was always impressive. Just look at it. Even without its Back to the Future film star credentials, this is an amazing looking car. The front wheel is smaller than the rear wheel, which is an intriguing thing. You've got these restricted drop down window glasses, so very, very reminiscent of concept cars at the time. Very unusual in a production car, but perhaps rather expectedly it was a disaster in the end. They made only around 9,000 DeLoreans. Production began in 1981. This comes from that first year of production. Things started going wrong in 1982, and by the end of 82 it was all over. They'd built more cars than they could sell. There were reliability issues, there were build quality issues, which is perhaps unsurprising. This was a workforce unused to working on cars, so there were issues early on, but a great many of them were resolved. The survival rate, surprisingly strong. Of that 9,000, probably a good 6,000 or so are thought to still exist today, and part support is actually excellent. There are companies in this country that specialise in DeLorean parts, and someone bought the rights to the DeLorean Motor Company. They're building electric versions over in America. So it's a car with an incredible legacy, even though the original was really an absolute disaster. But we'll take a look around first. We're going to head into the rear. I'm going to have to pop a gull-wing door, I'm afraid, and find the little catch here. Lift up this so 70s stroke 80s louver panel. I will when it opens properly. Bear with, folks, this is real life. There we go. So we'll lift up this pretty louvered panel at the back, and then we got this one which covers the engine, and just make sure it locks in so it don't fall on my head. And it proudly says DeLorean Motor Company. Can I just say, this is one of the best logos of all time, I think, and it's reversible as well. If you come and look at the glass just here, that's actually the DMC reversed for the special Securite glass. There's a glass panel here. I think that's quite a nice little touch myself, a nice reversible logo. But yeah, here is the PRV V6 engine, not the sportiest engine, but we've encountered it before in a pair of Alpines. I've driven an A310 and an A610, which both have this same power plant mounted here at the rear. So although 130 brake horsepower doesn't sound much, I have previously found those Alpines go well enough and make all the right noises. It'd be interesting to see if this one does the same. We have this space at the front, so there would be a spare wheel. It's an intriguing one because the wheels are different sizes, but there was a space saver spare wheel originally. This car lacks that. We've got access to the brake here, brake fluid, and this is your fuel filler. Early cars had a cutout here. You can still see the remnants of it in the bonnet shape. There's now a little bit of carpet there. So that was one improvement. They got rid of the flap, so you had to open the full front panel to access the fuel. And now we can see the windscreen wipers, which I think have aftermarket washers attached to them. I don't know what the original method of washing was. Maybe it was the same, but I can't believe the cable ties are standard fit. Oh, they're very, very good struts on that. So the structure of the car is quite intriguing in itself. Obviously we've got the stainless steel finish on the outside, apart from this plastic front bit, which always looked mildly discoloured. This one more so because the paint's peeling off. It looks like it might have gone back to the future. Maybe. But underneath, there's a glass fibre tub, and underneath that a standard steel chassis, epoxy coated. The chassis, backbone chassis, developed from the Lotus Esprit. The Esprit was mid-engined but adapted to take the rear engine, and Lotus involved in much of the development work of the final production car. Quite controversially, the death of Colin Chapman itself is considered intriguing. He died in 1982, just as people were starting to go, where has all the money gone? And one of his former colleagues was in 1992 jailed for 5 years for fraud. So intriguing questions to be asked, but I think it's probably time we went for a drive, which means I get to play with the doors again. And we'll show you the interior. So once you secure yourself in here, the first thing that strikes you is, much like the Alpines, to be honest, it is quite cozy. The door is kind of resting on my head. There is a cutout in the headliner for my head to go, but if I move to one side, I start hitting things. The driving position, I'm finding my legs are quite cramped, and I can't put the seat back much further because we're kind of right up against the bulkhead. Handbrake is down here to my right. This was a production change, the strap to make the handles easier to reach. We've got an electric mirror switch here, that's the locking, and then that's to open the door. But you've got this restricted window opening, which means it's already getting quite warm in here. This one has the manual 5-speed gearbox, thank goodness. Optional was a 3-speed automatic, which made it even slower. The 0 to 60 time was officially 8.5 seconds, but probably more realistic to say just below 10. And the automatic made things 100 times worse. If you come in and look at the dashboard, perhaps I'll grab the camera for that, we'll notice one of the most amusing aspects of this car is the 85 miles an hour federal speedometer. This car was originally sold in Texas, hence why we've got the temperature gauge in Fahrenheit as well. You know, lovely design here. That's meant to light up when the doors are open. I don't think it works on this example. But yeah, the federal speedometer maxes out at 85. You can go faster, but you won't know how fast you're going. And of course, the big thing about the DeLorean was it goes time traveling at 88, which you can't do. That's a fun touch. We've got extra controls here for aircon, sadly not working. I don't know what this one's for. We've got a clock. A later production change was the radio had the clock, so they deleted this. And then we got buttons back here, cigarette lighter, I assume, yes. And we've got a fog light switch added because it's now UK market. Electric window switches, heated rear window, all mod cons. And over there, a tiny little glove box, which I can't reach at all. Fortunately, my glamorous assistant can. And, well, I mean, there's some space in there. Not the most generous, but if you spin back over here, we have got a little luggage rack. You have got a little luggage area on the back. You could actually get quite a bit in there.
Supposedly for golf clubs.
Oh, for your golf clubs. Yeah, a bit of fun to swing in, but of course the fact that the gull-wing doors open up and take most of the roof with them, quite a good point, I think. The steering wheel is rather thrust at you. Got indicators left and wipers right. We better get on with the important business of doing a windscreen wiper demonstration, I think. I'm going to start the engine. And then I'm going to get told off for not having my seatbelt on, because federal. There we go. And push into wash. Oh crikey, that's water all over the place. What an excellent wiping performance though. Good overlap, no triangle of doom. That's a rather pleasing pattern, and we've got a mist function. So I've got a horn that does this, which is quite impressive, but then I've got a horn that also does this. So there you go, 2 different horns. We'll stick with the road legal one, I think, before we go out on the road. Loads of torque, so it's no bother at all to get her underway. And that's something I grew to love with the Alpines, was just their sheer effortlessness. They're not peaky, they're not exotic, they just kind of get on and get down the road. And this is kind of like that, but it doesn't quite have the ride composure. But I'll tell you what, when you're driving around a retail park, it's amazing how much attention this car gets. So if you're a shrinking violet, a DeLorean isn't for you. It is left-hand drive. Very, very few of them were actually right-hand drive. They never really got geared up for European production. So around town, apart from the odd crashy bump, oh hello, and people bibbing at you because they think you're Marty McFly or Doc Brown, it's pretty pleasant. It just bimbles along quite merrily. It's not really what sports cars are about, of course, but then sports cars are all about drama, and this car has buckets of the stuff in every aspect of the styling, in these gull-wing doors, and in some of the noises I make, and the smell of petrol, which is occasionally quite strong. The speedometer amusingly doesn't work at all, but this quite fancy reverse camera stroke rear view mirror handily has a little speed display on it, so that's quite good. Let's see if we can open her up a bit as we get down to this roundabout. So the DeLorean had so much promise about it, but like I say, the production numbers just never really stacked up. It was an odd choice for DeLorean. He'd built up such a reputation for making the right calls, but kind of fell out with the management at General Motors, decided to go his own way, and then it didn't go very well at all. And quite why governments thought, oh yes, we'll throw money at this man, I'm not entirely sure. They did go to some effort to try and claim some of it back. But despite being a left-hand drive rear engine sports car, it's actually quite easy to drive here in the UK. There's good visibility because the over-the-shoulder vision is much better than you expect. The steering is unassisted rack and pinion and has quite a nice feel. It doesn't feel quite as alive as an actual Lotus. I suspect it might just be because this car is a bit heavier than a Lotus, because you sit so very low, so today's modern SUVs are mildly terrifying. So we still only got a 50 mile an hour speed limit, but cruising along in fifth, and we're doing barely any revs, and it does feel quite relaxing. There's a bit of shake, rattle and roll in here. Okay, not everything is the finest quality, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people made out. One slight issue, the aircon isn't working on this one, and we've had to do the windows up to make it a little quieter in here. So we've got the cooling fan, or the heater fan rather, going full pelt on cold, but yeah, air conditioning would be very welcome. Try not to crash into the white lining lorry, that would be bad times. Ended with bonnet stripes the owner didn't want. Oh yeah. Into a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. Thank you, motorways. So this car itself has a fairly intriguing history. It was sold new in Texas, but by 1990 it was parked up, and it spent pretty much the next 20 years being parked up. Being a Texas car, got a bit sun-scorched, hence we've got this aftermarket mat on the dashboard, just to try and protect it. And similarly, leather seats on this one, actually covered in these like lamb's wool covers that feel very period. Everything in the 1980s seemed to have these sort of seat covers. First chance to actually get her up. Oh yeah, we're doing a little more than I intended. Careful, we almost went time traveling. It doesn't gather pace like an exotic sports car, like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, but there's so much torque, it does it so very, very effortlessly. And some people will miss that drama, but for others, especially in America, where corners and acceleration points are in short supply, they would have admired this as it was, I think. Those acceleration figures, yeah, they don't match the drama of those looks, but like I say, it's not always about shoving yourself in backwards in the seat, is it? But the owner of this one bought it, it sounds like it was a bit of a lockdown project. We've all been there, and spent a good few years recommissioning it. It was full of mud wasp nests. He reckons he's had about 40 kilograms worth of mud out of pretty much every cavity in the thing. So it probably goes much better now. He's had to sort out fuel injection systems. It's still a work in progress. There's some bits of trim missing. Personally think that matters not an awful lot. Yeah, I've got a bit of wind noise because that window doesn't fit perfectly, but like I say, this is a very HubNut example of a DeLorean. But I think it's also an example of what so many of them were like. It must have been difficult to get them looked after once the company folded, but others did march in, like I say, to buy the assets of the broken company and to keep things going. And the car does boast a very active scene for in terms of parts and service, which is very encouraging. You wouldn't expect that from a car that had such a troubled and very, very short production life. Okay, that'll do for now, I think. So you may ask, what do you actually use this car for? Going to shows? Well, maybe, but the current owner has actually used it for the school run. I can just imagine the sort of scene that must create. Be an ideal prom car, I think, a DeLorean. So there we go, the beguiling DeLorean, a car which has confounded many, is very controversial, still divides opinion somewhat today. I think there are some people who think they're absolutely desperately cool, and some people wouldn't want to be dead seen in one. What I will say is, if you're a shy, shrinking violet, you don't want to be in a car like this. We've had people bibbing at us, waving all over the shop. So it's a car which really, really gets attention, and always has done for, you know, over 40 years now. It's quite remarkable. It is actually a very pleasant car to drive, slightly heavy clutch, slightly heavy steering, but otherwise surprisingly joyous. We've driven it in so much horrible traffic today, and it's just kept going really, really nicely. And yeah, it's a car that on the face of it is just a gimmick, but I think actually it's a whole lot more. Flawed, certainly, but good fun nonetheless. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the HubNut store if you wish to buy lovely merchandise. I wish to see you in a future video. Farewell. Yeah. I'm getting myself.